What if I told you that Nigeria, the country with the highest malaria burden in the world, imports over $100 million worth of malaria drugs every year, with almost no local production? Now, this hits particularly close to home because I was born and raised in Lagos, Nigeria. So whenever I would fall sick, my mom's first question to me was always, when last did you treat malaria? The drugs like the one you see on the screen have been a staple in our household medicine cabinet, despite being completely outsourced. Now, what if I asked you, what % of vaccines being used in Africa are made in Africa? What would you say? 0? 20? 5? Well, the correct answer is less than 1%. And for Nigeria in particular, we import all of the vaccines that we use. It is for reasons like this that the African Union set a target for the continent to produce 60% of its vaccine needs by 2040. Now, I'm not here to propose a 15-year action plan to you for how we can get there, or to even talk about this from a continental perspective, because Africa is very full of heterogeneity. What I am here to talk about is how Nigerians can think of reducing this lack of self-sufficiency in our biotechnology industry by first and foremost strengthening our academic research capabilities. Nigeria is a country with over 200 million people. We are a market in our own rights. But first, I have a bit of a backstory. In high school in Nigeria, I really loved chemistry and biology, and I vividly remember reading these 2 biology textbooks back to front. And by the end of high school, I decided I was going to apply to MIT. Now, needless to say, especially now that you know that I was the type of student to read a biology textbook for fun, I got in, which was the start of the past 4 most transformative years of my life. Now, while in high school in biology, my knowledge of biology was very limited to textbooks and very much theoretical. As soon as I arrived at MIT, I dove headfirst straight into research. I joined a lab, my first on-campus job, and it was here that I learned about the powerful techniques behind things like gene editing and gene silencing through tools like CRISPR. I learned how to ask scientific questions and how to answer those questions. But more importantly, I learned to see the bigger picture of my research. By joining the MIT Biotech group, I came to understand that my work in CRISPR was more than just about gene silencing. It was laying the foundation for innovations like gene therapies that changed patients' lives. And it was this understanding that really afforded me a switch in perspective, so that when I see the COVID mRNA vaccine, it's really important to me that I understand how it works, that I understand the science. It's because maybe then I can apply that science in the context of a new disease like Lassa fever, which is still yet to have a vaccine. This is science. It is this buildup that pushes biotechnology industries forward. Discoveries that take us from answering basic science questions like how does mRNA translate to proteins, to more translational science questions like how can we harness this understanding of mRNA to protein science to create a COVID vaccine. Now, this translational way of thinking is something that I learned at MIT. Because at MIT, we are right in the middle of the biotech hub of the world, Kendall Square. We're surrounded by biotech companies. But before a lot of these biotech companies came to be, there were postdocs and students and professors that saw that there was a gap between science and healthcare, and so decided to birth ventures that could link their early stage academic discoveries to the large-scale production of solutions to diseases, connecting the dots in this biopharmaceutical R&D pipeline and ultimately building an independent biotechnology industry. Now, could we recreate something like Kendall Square in Nigeria? What would it look like to take the essence of this ecosystem and build something on our own terms in Nigeria? Something that is built by the growth of like-minded students and professors coming together to scale innovation to production. But before we can do this in Nigeria, we have to begin by getting this first stage of the R&D pipeline right, this discovery-based academic research stage. But the reality right now is that across several life science departments in public universities in Nigeria, even if a professor is able to offer research mentorship to students, it's usually with limited to no funding, meaning that graduate students are almost always prioritized. So that for undergraduate students to gain research, they have to fall back on this 3 to 6 month mandated period of an industrial training, usually from their second year and above. The issue here is that a lot of biotech and R&D industrial training opportunities are very limited and hence very competitive. They are poorly compensated, if not entirely unpaid, and sometimes require that a student even pays to take part. which means that several students will just opt in for more routine work, like running malaria diagnostic tests in hospitals on patients, which is not research. Here at MIT, undergrads are actively sought after by labs. And we're encouraged and able to do research from our first semester on campus for as long as we want and get paid to do it. We're also encouraged to think about exploratory research, to design experiments and to innovate, and to cross disciplinary boundaries by venturing outside of our departments, in contrast to the often siloed nature of many life science departments across universities in Nigeria. Now, this last point is very important to me because it is this flexibility that has allowed me to major in molecular biology and computer science, and to think in an interdisciplinary way that can really challenge the possibilities of biotechnology. And these differences matter a lot to me because every year I get questions from students in Nigeria asking, how can I get to MIT? And usually only one or two of them will get in, and that makes me really sad. So I have decided to flip that question back on them and to challenge myself to instead ask, how can I take as much of my MIT education back to universities in Nigeria, in the essence of our problem solving and our interdisciplinary thinking? The University of Lagos, UNILAG, is one of, if not the best public universities in Nigeria, mostly because my mom has taught there for over 17 years. But in 2018, I supported her in the launch of a first-of-its-kind space, the Artificial Intelligence and Robotics Lab. This lab is growing very rapidly, but it exists outside of academic departments such that it attracts students from various disciplines, from mechanical engineering to systems engineering. Now, working in this lab and trying to drive it forward has had me constantly thinking about how spaces like this can be replicated on an even grander scale for university students to engage in interdisciplinary research in the life sciences and biotechnology. Which is why I'm very inspired by the work that is going on at an organization in a private university in Nigeria, formerly known as ACEGID. Now, ACEGID is really at the forefront of our biotech industry, having been the first place that the coronavirus was sequenced in Africa. And while most of their opportunities are only open to graduate students, their model really stands out to me for their embracing of this idea of by Nigerians for Nigeria, while still leveraging partnerships with African and international researchers abroad, especially as a means for grant access. You see, Nigerians are everywhere, in every country, in every field, at every level of hierarchy. And this is really a call to us. We need to continue to mobilize our resources as a global Nigerian diaspora and collaborate with Nigerians locally. We need to leverage our networks of non-Nigerian allies to build our infrastructure and for bold leadership. ACEGID is led by a very visionary scientist who actually received his training abroad here, but he shows what is possible when we decide that no matter how far away we are from home, we always look back and invest to build our nation. Now, ACEGID also operates on a model that's very similar to AirLab, where they balance being independent of academic departments with being affiliated with the university, which means that they're able to innovate while still maintaining access to institutional resources and cross-disciplinary student talent. But ACEGID is just one example. We need several of such institutions to cater to the needs of the industrial training of life science students across universities in Nigeria. So imagine what could happen if we had a network of interdisciplinary research hubs, where students are trained to be researchers that are locally grounded, globally connected, and translational science-minded without having to pay for it. Something that is accessible to undergraduate students, and maybe even starts with a simple goal of just trying to increase Nigeria's representation in international publications, bringing more visibility to our science, and ensuring that we are producing science that is high quality enough to shape a local and global research agenda. Now, as I prepare to leave MIT and wrap up my time here, and also to start my PhD in computational biology and medicine this fall, I will not stop thinking of a world where a version of Kendall Square exists in Nigeria. It's not going to be simple. Like, progress in this stage is going to be systemically challenged, and it cannot happen overnight. But if I, in my lifetime, get to see Nigeria at the forefront of biotech, being a producer and maybe even exporter of vaccines for some of the most high priority and neglected diseases like Lassa fever and tuberculosis, and maybe even an exporter of malaria drugs, and know that I was a part of that, that would be a dream come true. And if we can get this right for Nigeria, then other African countries can follow suit. There are many African countries represented here at MIT. So what I'm envisioning is not just building for one nation. If we get this right, we could be laying the foundation for a continent-wide transformation. Thank you.